comment,
and subscribe for more content.
Where's the notification bell?
It's to the right of you.
Oh.
What's up, guys? Welcome to this edition of a Funko podcast, our special fandom-related podcast, more specifically titled We Scare Because We Care, the Monsters, Inc. podcast. I am DK Wrestler.
And I am MD Shady.
And like I had mentioned, today is our last fandom-related podcast for the year of 2021. Super pumped about this. This is actually like 1 year in the making because we decided to do this right in the process of doing our Toy Story fan-related podcast around this time last year. So it's pretty cool that we're finally here 1 year later from that Toy Story podcast to do Monsters, Inc., another great Pixar movie. And it just so happens today is also a pretty special day as terms to the release of this podcast, because today will also be International MD Shady Day, MD Shady's birthday, November 5th, as this gets released. So I guess I will mention happy birthday, MD, even though we're 2 weeks away from your birthday as of this recording.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
All right. So without further ado, so for this podcast, anyone who's new to the podcast, if you've loved Monsters, Inc., this is a great podcast for you. If you love Funko Pops, this is great. But if you like both Monsters, Inc. and Funko Pops together, it's going to be a great podcast for you guys. And today we are going to be discussing not only the 2001 film of Monsters, Inc., but we will also be talking about the prequel Monsters University. And we will also be discussing about the newly released, or at least new for the past, I would say 6 months, of the Disney Plus series Monsters at Work, just because there's probably not likely going to be a podcast on each of those other Disney Plus / movies to do. So we might as well have thrown Monsters University and Monsters at Work into this podcast. And I do want to mention we are talking all, I believe it's close to 30 Monsters Inc. pops, including the Monsters at Work pops, into this podcast, except there are some exceptions of what are not going to be included. One is the Pop Minis 2-pack, if anyone remembers when they used to make 2-packs where they are like mini pops. Those won't be included. The Vampire Sully from the Halloween box, Amazon exclusive last year, because it just doesn't fit in any of the movies. It's just, let's put Sully in a vampire outfit. And also, just like our Toy Story podcast last year, we won't be talking about the Alien remix pops in this podcast, because once again, it is just the alien from Toy Story dressed up as certain Pixar characters, so they don't fit the mold of the actual movies. And we'll talk about each of the movies / Disney Plus series as we go and kind of our early memories of that. So without further ado, let's kick off with the very first movie, the one that kicked it off 20 years ago, Monsters, Inc., November 2nd, 2001, with a budget of $115 million and the box office at $577.4 million, making a profit of $462.4 million. And the plot, as provided by a user on IMDb, a city of monsters with no humans called Monstropolis centers around the city's power company, Monsters, Inc. The lovable, confident, tough, furry, blue, behemoth-like giant named James P. Sullivan, better known as Sully, and his wisecracking best friend, short, green Cyclops monster Mike Wazowski, discover what happens when the real world interacts with theirs in the form of a 2-year-old baby girl dubbed Boo, who accidentally sneaks into the monster world with Sully one night. And now it's up to Sully and Mike to send Boo back in her door before anybody finds out, especially two evil villains such as Sully's main rival and scarer, a chameleon-like Randall, a monster that Boo is very afraid of, who possesses the ability to change the color of his skin, and Mike and Sully's boss, Mr. Waternoose, the chairman and chief executive officer of Monsters, Inc. Monsters, Inc., what a great concept for a movie. Just that whole plot itself, like even if you've never seen Monsters, Inc., I feel like, boom, you're already grasping the plot there and you really want to watch the movie. A lot of funny moments involved in this movie, and there's a lot of memorable characters. It's not like the majority of movies where I feel like you'll know one or two characters of the main characters. A lot of the side characters I feel like are super memorable too, just because of the way they act or the way they look in Monsters, Inc. And I can easily say that Monsters, Inc. is in my top 5 favorite Pixar movies of all time, whether or not I include Toy Story 1 to 4 taking up 4 spots on the list.
I mean, Monsters Inc. What a work of art. Such an amazing movie. I remember seeing it in theaters. I guess I don't know if you're going to ask me like one of my first memories of Monsters Inc., but one of my first memories besides seeing it in theaters was going to Zares, I believe it was, here in Canada, and seeing a copy of the DVD, and I begged my mom to buy me it because I just loved the movie that much. And then I remember getting it that day and watching it over and over and over again. I love the movie. Yes, there are a lot of memorable characters. You banged the nail with that one because like every character is like, oh, this was such a great character, and it's definitely up there in my Pixar listing too. Maybe even in my movies of all time, it might break the top 10, and that is subject with, like you said, how many of the Toy Story movies count as one spot or not. But the movie is great, and I'm so happy to see that we've gotten other stuff like Monsters University and Monsters at Work because I really hope that they keep this franchise going.
All right, so we'll talk about the Funko Pops for Monsters Inc. specifically, which that is going to be the majority of the Funko Pops we talk about. And so we'll kick off with obviously the first character, Sully, also known as James P. Sullivan. And like mentioned, he is a big blue and purple monster who is considered to be the top scarer at Monsters Incorporated, which he has quite a bit of Funko Pops as terms to this lineup. We got the original variant of Sully that was in like one of the first 10, I believe, Disney Pops that were made by Funko, followed by a flocked variant that was a San Diego Comic-Con 2011 limited to 480 piece. Then the following year at San Diego Comic-Con 2012, limited to 480 pieces, a 9-inch Sully with Boo that is also metallic, I believe. Fast forward to 2018 with a set of Monsters Inc. Pops. We have 2 more Sully Pops. We have ourselves a common version and then a flocked version that went to Toys R Us. And then we got ourselves the newer Sully with the trash lid, which there's a common variant. And then once again, there is a flocked variant that will be an Amazon exclusive. And then the last pop for just Sully himself is Sully with Boo, which is a Funko Shop exclusive. Then, of course, we go on to Mike Wazowski, which, of course, a green spherical monster who is best friends with Sully and works side by side with them. There's the original variant, also a part of that very first Monsters Inc. set, or not just Monsters Inc. set, but one of the very first Disney Pops ever made by Funko, along with a glow-in-the-dark variant of Mike Wazowski, which is a San Diego Comic-Con 2011 limited to 480 piece pop. And for the newest 20th anniversary lineup, we have Mike Wazowski with Mitts. Up next, we have ourselves George Sanderson, once again, one of the OG Disney Pops. It was number 14 in the Disney lineup, which George Sanderson was one of the monsters in Monsters Incorporated who ended up having their fur shaved off by the CDA after code 2319 gets called. Up next, we have Boo, which has 3 variants of herself. Boo, of course, is a human little girl that Sully accidentally lets into Monsters Incorporated after opening her door, which we have the original one, which is Boo in the Monsters outfit, along with later on in that 2018 wave, we had casual Boo. And then we have ourselves for the 20th anniversary lineup, a new variant of the Boo with the monster outfit, except it's got the hood up. We have Roz, which is a slug with hair that sticks up and works as the secretary over at Monsters Inc., or disguised as a secretary. Realistically, we all know what happens at the end there. We have Chef, which is a red octopus that cooks food in the restaurant that Mike and Celia go on a date to. And speaking of Celia, that's the next pop. Celia, a purple monster with rattlesnake hair that is the receptionist over at Monsters Incorporated and is Mike's love interest. And then the final pops to discuss about, same character, different variants, is the Yeti, which is an abominable snowman who lives in a cave of the Himalayas and loves making lemon-flavored snow cones. There's a common variant, and there is also going to be a Hot Topic exclusive scented variant. So with the Sully Pops, I'm not going to go one by one because I feel like with my opinion of the Sully Pops is kind of an evolution of how crazy the detail has been as terms to when you look at the very first Sully pop compared to what we're seeing for the upcoming 20th anniversary wave, which is pretty crazy because like I remember seeing the original Sully pop probably when I bought the original Buzz Lightyear pop as my first ever Funko Pop in my collection and just seeing like, all right, that's pretty decent. But then you look as time goes over, you look at the 2018 version, that's pretty decent. I mean, different posing. It's actually got a slight mouth on it, which is pretty cool. But then you look at the newer variants of Sully for this 20th anniversary wave, and it is just so awesome, especially how they added a mouth to it, and it's got some sort of facial expression, which is basically how I would see Sully. Like, obviously, with Funko Pops, they don't have mouths, but there are those certain characters that I believe do deserve to have mouths. You see them on Rick and Morty characters, you see them on certain animes, but I feel like in this case, Sully is one of those characters that needs a mouth because of the fact he's a monster, and monsters make scary faces. So they got to have mouths essentially for this Funko Pop. So it's cool to see kind of the evolution of what you see Sully originally in Funko Pop form. And then you see the newer variants, which they have gradually gotten better. I know that 2011 flocked version of Sully is worth, oh my God, in the 4 digits. And I think that's even in US dollar. I can only imagine how much it is in Canadian dollar. Mike Wazowski. Mike Wazowski was already a cool looking Funko Pop. You couldn't really do much with Mike Wazowski because he is a spherical figure, and they couldn't really do the normal Funko Pop eye with Mike Wazowski because just having a huge black dot would just be so weird. So having the white around the background of the pupil there is really cool. The glow in the dark version, I have never seen it in person and what it looks like, but I assume it's good because green is a great color, glow in the dark. But then once again, you fast forward to this 20th anniversary wave, and it's crazy to see Mike Wazowski with a mouth as terms of the Funko Pop. And it's great because it goes along with that same scene as the Sully there with the trash lid. So it's really cool that they added a mouth to Mike Wazowski because Mike Wazowski also has some pretty cool facial expressions as terms to Monsters Inc. Then we got George Sanderson, which it's pretty cool. We had gotten George Sanderson. The one thing that was really odd while preparing for this podcast and looking at these pops over is that for the pop box, the eyes are black, but the pop itself is white eyes, which I kind of find really odd in my opinion. I think it would have been fine just having the black eyes, to be honest, because it looks pretty cool on the pop box. It just looks really weird as terms to the actual pop itself. But overall, I guess it's pretty decent. And I really hope that they are planning on making another George Sanderson, even if it's this mold, but an updated sculpt. Then we got the Boo Pops, which the original one is pretty cool, especially the one with the Sully that I didn't really get to mention much. Pretty cool for the time that it was made. The casual Boo is really cool that they made that because that's how we kind of first see her with like the pink shirt. You got the Mike Wazowski doll, or I don't exactly remember what Mike Wazowski called the doll, but essentially it looks like it is a Cyclops monster like Mike Wazowski. And it's really cool they added that with this Boo. And then we have the new Boo, which is just excellent. Probably my favorite Boo out of the 3 Boos that we have for the Monsters Inc. lineup. They did a really great job with this. Roz is such an excellent pop, and I love the way that they did, like they added the Funko Pop eyes, but they made it so that it is the color of her skin, and then you have the slits because it always looks like her eyes are like pretty much closed the entire time, which is so cool. And I love the facial expression and everything involved with this Roz. I think Roz was one of those characters where it's like, man, it'd be so cool to have a Roz. And when they made that 2018 wave, it was really cool to see Roz. And I feel like Roz like was kind of like the huge seller of that wave, to be honest. I feel like you didn't really see much Roz's in stores because, of course, there were so many Sullys and Mikes, or there wasn't a Mike for this wave. But I feel like the shelf sitter would have probably been Chef, which, speaking of Chef, that's the next pop. This was kind of a random pop to add to the Monsters Inc. lineup. Like, did we really need Chef? Not really, but it's still kind of cool that we ended up getting Chef, because I feel like, oh, they'll probably never make a Chef pop, but they did. So it's pretty cool. Maybe if it was a pop deluxe, though, it would have been a little bit better where you have a table and it's like cooking food. But the way that it is still pretty decent. Celia, long overdue. We mentioned this about a month ago when these pops were originally announced by Funko themselves. So awesome to see Celia in Funko Pop form. I love the way that they did the rattlesnake hair, although I've mentioned before, I wish it was white eyes with like a black dot on them. It's kind of expected, especially when we've seen that SpongeBob pop down with Gary, that the eyes would just be all black. So I kind of already expected that. So it's still cool that we got Celia, and I'm sure this is going to be a huge seller when this releases. And last but not least, we have Yeti, and it is so cool to see Yeti. I would have expected to see Yeti as like maybe a Comic-Con exclusive, but we got a common and a normal exclusive, which is really, really cool. I love the idea. They made it scented. They could have made it flocked, obviously, but they already made the one Sully for this wave flocked. And to have a scented version is different, and it is awesome because lemon flavored snow cones, it's going to smell like lemon. It's going to be a great Funko Pop when this releases. I can't wait to kind of smell the scent of the scented version going to Hot Topic. And I just can't wait to see the pop overall in person when this releases. I believe as early as December is what some websites are saying.
Okay, you did a pretty good job of actually summing up a lot of things that I wanted to say. The original Sullys are kind of meh, but at the time they were definitely really cool. I mean, it's like, oh, sweet, it's a pop of Sully, especially when pops were just coming out. But then obviously we fast forward to 2018 and you see the newer kind of mold of Sully and just much better. And if you notice on the boxes, there's an E in Sully's name with the newer ones, but with the OGs, it's just there's the E is left out of the name, which is kind of funny that they made that mistake. And then for the newer Sully Pops, these are wicked as well. I mean, the facial expression is great. That is something that is needed for Sully, I would say, especially for the scene that this pop is trying to represent with the trash lid and the like the colander on his head. And it's really cool that we got a flocked version of that pop as well. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when I'm sure people want flocked Sullys because obviously he's a big furry kitty. And then the Sully with Boo is also a great looking pop. I think the facial expression is done very well. And then Boo kind of poking out from the box is also pretty funny and it looks really good. Then moving on to the pops of Mike Wazowski. Yeah, the original Mike Wazowski was done really well. I'm so thankful that they went for the black eye with the white around it rather than just doing a huge black eye or maybe trying something else because I think this works the best. And I'm really glad that they did that. The glow in the dark version, I don't know if we really needed that, but at least he's green, so the glow should be good. But I could see because it was early on in pop history, I guess you could say, that they're just testing the waters with like glow in the dark pops and stuff like that. So it makes kind of sense in that sense. And then we have the newest Mike Wazowski, and this pop looks great. And this is a pop that needs a mouth like this because in all of the monsters, I guess we'll just call it monsters series, Mike Wazowski is a very emotional character, and it makes sense to have a mouth because he obviously only has one eye and he expresses a lot of his emotion through his mouth and I guess his eye. Then we have the George Sanderson. And yeah, it is weird that the eyes are black on the box. I think I would prefer it that way. The white eyes do look a little bit weird on this pop, but this pop is pretty awesome nonetheless. But you can tell that it's an older pop just because of the way it's stylized. And I'm sure Funko could do a lot better nowadays in 2021. Then we have the Boo Pops, and these are great. I think the original Boo, that's really cool, where she's got her hood down and she's obviously in the Little Monsters outfit. That's pretty cool. The casual Boo is so nice. I love how they included the kind of teddy bear with her because I think that that was kind of a little bit of a memorable scene from Monsters Inc. and it just makes sense. And then we have the hooded Boo, and this is really cool. I'm glad that they did this because I feel like most people would want both versions with the hood down and with the hood up. And I think this pop looks great. Next up, we have Roz, which is arguably probably the best Monsters Inc. pop that we've seen. I mean, just so much detail. It looks just like her. You can almost not tell that it's a pop, but at the same time, it is stylized like one. And the mouth looks awesome on the pop as well. It makes so much sense to have the mouth like that. This pop is just amazing. Then we have Chef, and yeah, this was a little bit of a curveball. It was kind of weird to see Chef come out rather than some other characters that could definitely get Funko Pops, but at the same time, it's pretty cool that we got him. This new Celia is awesome. I mean, it's the first Celia, but it is a new pop. Wicked pop. I mean, it looks so good. I love how the snakes look in the hair, how they have pop eyes that are styled like pops as well. That just makes so much sense. And I really enjoy the pose. I think that they did a great job with this pop. And then we have Yeti, or he's also known as Adorable. And this thing is wicked. This is one of my favorite pops from the Monsters Inc. lineup. And I'm so happy that they made a scented version. A flocked version would have been cool, but scented is also awesome. And I want more scented pops in my collection. So Yeti will definitely have to come home with me when it hits up Hot Topic.
All right, so now we're going to move on to the next movie involved in this series, which is Monsters University, which, of course, Monsters University released June 21st, 2013, with a budget of $200 million. The box office at $743.6 million, making an approximate profit of $543.6 million. And the plot for this movie: when little Mike Wazowski went onto the scare floor, he wanted nothing more than to become a scare. Years later, he spent the rest of his days at Monsters University, but then he meets the lazy student James P. Sully Sullivan, who is way more of a scarer than he is and is in a family of famous scarers. Then Mike competes for the scare games, but little does he know he needs a fraternity. Soon he has a team of 4 losers who are no good at anything. Then Mike has to be friendly to Sully when he joins their team. Now Mike and Sully have to win this in order to not just become the best of friends, but get themselves and their fraternity into the scare program. It's going to be a lot of hard work. My thoughts on Monsters University is like the initials of Uzma Kappa. The movie was okay. It was good to know the backstory of Mike and Sully and to kind of see like they weren't friends at first, but then they eventually became friends, obviously. And I did feel like when you were watching this movie, you kind of thought, okay, well, they'll end up in the scare program and they end up at Monsters Incorporated because obviously they were in Monsters Incorporated during Monsters Inc. But there was a lot of unexpected twists and turns. Like, obviously, if you've seen the movie, they didn't actually end up getting into the scare program, or at least Sully and Mike didn't. It was their friends in that fraternity, Uzma Kappa, that ended up getting into it after Sully kind of rigged the one machine at the end of the movie. And I feel like a lot of people would have thought, like, because this was a prequel and not like a sequel like we wanted, that this could have been one of those films that Toy Story 2 was originally intended to be, which was just straight to DVD, not going into theaters. But I mean, this movie did make not only more money in the box office than Monsters Inc., but made more of a profit than Monsters Inc. That really says something that maybe this movie should have been in the theaters, but who's to say realistically? But this was a pretty decent movie. Not one of my favorite Pixar movies, but it's still pretty decent movie.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty good synopsis. It was okay. And it was really great to kind of see the backstory of Sully and Mike. But we definitely wanted to see further on, like what goes on. We want to see, does Sully ever get to see Boo again? Stuff like that. So when it was kind of announced and came out, it was like, is this really what we wanted? But at the same time, it's kind of cool that we got it. And wow, I can't believe that it was 2013. I mean, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but holy moly.
So the Funko Pops involved with this, which there aren't that many, there's a total of 5 with 2 variants of 2 different characters, which starting off, we have ourselves Mike Wazowski, which has the Monsters University hat and the books, along with a metallic version that was a San Diego Comic-Con 2013 limited to 480 piece, along with Sully with an Uzma Kappa jersey, which also has a metallic variant that was a San Diego Comic-Con 2013, limited to 480 pieces. And the last pop involved here is Randall Boggs, which, of course, Randall Boggs, a purple chameleon who is Mike Wazowski's roommate. He later becomes one of the cool kids by being brought into the most popular fraternity, Roar Omega Roar. These pops are okay. It's cool to see a slightly different variant of Mike Wazowski by just adding a hat in the books because it fits with the movie. He's a student at this point, so there wouldn't be Mike Wazowski in any other form realistically, in my opinion. Obviously, it's cool to see Mike Wazowski, and up until essentially with this new wave of Monsters Inc. pops, this was kind of the last time that we had ever saw a Mike Wazowski pop. So to think this would have been the last Mike Wazowski pop for nearly 10 years is pretty crazy. And the metallic variant, I don't think it was really necessary to make it metallic. I mean, I guess the only difference really besides that it's metallic is the fact, and now that I realize, is that the hand is waving up for the metallic variant. So maybe, okay, maybe we can have a metallic variant. But like even then, we can go to the Sully for a sec so that I can bring up my point is that the Sully is pretty cool with the Uzma Kappa jersey, and the metallic variant is okay. I kind of like how the blue is on the metallic, but at the same time, man, did we really need it? Instead of having metallic variants of Mike and Sully, we could have gotten more characters. Like I would have liked to see the other Uzma Kappa members because I feel like they would have cool molds that could be into Funko Pop form. I can't exactly remember the names of the characters, but you have the one character that has like the two heads and they kind of think differently, or even like the mom that lives in the house there. I think she would have been a cool Funko Pop instead of having metallic variants of already existing characters for the lineup. I know these were San Diego Comic-Con exclusives, which makes sense in that there were 480 pieces. But I mean, if they would have expanded on the lineup, it would have been cool to see more characters involved. But I will give it credit. They brought in Randall Boggs, which still surprisingly to this day is the only Randall pop in this Monsters Inc. lineup. They never even made a normal Randall Boggs pop, which is just so weird because I feel like Randall would have been that character that Funko could just pump up different versions because he is a chameleon and he had different color skins throughout not only Monsters University, but Monsters Inc. also. So it's still crazy that they did make a Randall Boggs after this potentially, or even before realistically.
The Mike Wazowski pop is all right. I mean, I think it is pretty cool that they used a similar mold to the original pop and then they gave him the books and the hat. It makes sense. That's all you really needed to do for this pop. So they did that well. And then they went and made it metallic, which I don't think looks bad, but yeah, you brought up a good point. Like we could have seen other characters, which would have been a lot better than, let's say, this metallic version, which is kind of unnecessary. But at the same time, it is kind of cool that he is posed just slightly different. Then we have the Sully, and this fits into that kind of evolutionary train that you're talking about with the Sully pops, where you have the original mold, you have this one, you have the 2018 version, and then we have the new ones now. It's so weird how they just get slightly better as time goes on. It makes sense, but it's weird to look at it and kind of see it actually happening. The metallic, the blue is all right, but I don't know, like we just didn't need these metallic versions, but they're kind of cool. And lastly, we have Randall Boggs, which, yeah, it's very surprising. How have we not seen a Randall pop for Monsters Inc., especially, let's say, in this new lineup that we just got? I mean, yeah, you could have a million different versions of him, whether it would be like a clear version or him having like the Toy Story wallpaper, which would have been kind of cool as like an exclusive to a con or something. But it's great that we did get a Randall Boggs, but it's not really the one that we want per se, but it does look pretty cool. I like the glasses. I like how he's kind of has like the little varsity jacket or sweater, whatever he's got on. I think that this pop was done well. And if they were to make a Randall Boggs from actual Monsters Inc., I think it would be awesome.
Are you looking for great pop protectors? Then look no further than popbox.ca. They have a variety of 4-inch and 6-inch protectors in different quantities. Do you want to get 10 protectors, 20? You can get even up to 250 pop protectors over on popbox.ca. And also use our promo code of Funko Popcast for 10% off of your entire purchase of pop protectors. The code is going on until supplies last. So go get your pop protector needs now over on popbox.ca funko.ca using our code of Funko Popcast to get 10% off and also free shipping over $75 in both Canada and the US with duty fees included.
And let me tell you guys, we're not just screwing around here. These are some great pop protectors. We own a multitude of these protectors. They are some of the best I've seen. Stop buying from EB Games. I'm not boycotting EB Games by any means, but their pop protectors are not as good. So again, use code AFunkoPopcast for 10% off.
All right. Last but not least, the last essentially not movie, but last, I guess, series we'll talk about throughout these monster series is Monsters at Work, which I think this is actually the first time in a Funko Popcast history as terms the fandom related podcast. We're actually going to be discussing about something essentially was released this year, like within the year. Usually like the closest would have been our Toy Story podcast, when at that time we talked about Toy Story 4, which released the year prior to go with the podcast. But to talk about something this year is pretty cool. Monsters at Work obviously released July 7th, 2021 on Disney Plus as a 10 episode series. Plot for that: Monsters University Scare graduate Tyler Tuskman receives a letter of acceptance from Henry J. Waternoose III to be an official scare at Monsters Incorporated. However, Tyler arrives at the factory the day after Waternoose is arrested for his plot to kidnap human children to forcibly extract their screams for energy. The board of directors put Sully and Mike in charge of the factory and give Roz's old position to her twin sister, Rose. Under Sully and Mike's new management, the company is revamped and the scares are now jokesters. Having studied for a discontinued job, Tyler is transferred to Myth, Monsters Incorporated facilities team, as a maintenance worker, a position he dislikes and is eager to leave. He runs away from his new co-workers, bluffs his way onto the laugh floor, and attempts to make a child laugh. Because of his lack of experience, his attempt backfires and results in a major accident. Nevertheless, Sully believes in him and Tyler reluctantly accepts the position in the facilities crew while Mike decides to teach a comedy class. What a pretty excellent series this has been. Only 10 episodes. I felt like they could have pulled off more, even if there was filler episodes. But man, just the whole idea that it literally takes place probably a day or two after the events of Monsters, Inc. And just talk about being at the right place at the wrong time for Tyler Tuskman. Just overall, the whole idea of making it kind of flipped, turned upside down in terms of you're now jokesters instead of scares, because they believe that laughter produces more energy than scaring, considering that the slogan of the Monsters Incorporated, I believe now, is "It's laughter we're after and not we scare because we care." So it's really cool. And I love the casting, honestly, especially for each character. I want to point out about Ben Feldman, who plays Tyler Tuskman. People would know him as Jonah from Superstore. It's exactly what Tyler Tuskman reminds me of. It's literally Jonah from Superstore, except in monster form. The way he acts, the way that he just presents himself, it just reminds me of Jonah so much. And I feel like that could be why they hired Ben Feldman to play this role, because it's literally Jonah himself. So it's like, all right, let's just bring him in. And then having Mindy Kaling play as Val Little, who we know as Kelly Kapoor in The Office, and Henry Winkler as Fritz. Just the whole cast is great. Even bringing in Gabriel Iglesias for one episode was pretty cool. And it's great to even still see Mike and Sully. Not every episode. I think Mike, you do see every episode, but I think there's one episode actually you don't get to see Sully. But it's still great to see them, but not making Sully and Mike the really main focus of the series. It's more towards Tyler Tuskman. And I felt like after watching the series, they have confirmed a season 2, but I don't exactly know how they're going to pull off season 2 with the way that season 1 ended, because I feel like the whole premise was already resolved in season 1. Like you could have done, I felt like, a couple seasons of Tyler working towards becoming a jokester. And then you see season 1, which I'm sorry if you haven't seen Monsters at Work yet, to anyone listening, but the fact that Tyler Tuskman is a jokester now. He got hired at the end of the last episode. So now it's like, what could you do for season 2? I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. There are theories that because it is basically within the same timeline as Monsters, Inc., it's not like a few years after that, we could see what you had actually mentioned earlier. Potentially Sully could reunite with Boo at some point during in the second season as kind of a storyline plot for the second season. I don't exactly know. What are your thoughts? Because I know you just recently finished Monsters at Work in preparation for this podcast.
Yeah, so I definitely have a lot to talk about Monsters at Work. First thing is wow, I was kind of blown away by it. I really, really enjoyed it. I think it was so well done. The second thing I want to talk about, I guess, is Ben Feldman. And yes, I'm surprised that you picked up the same vibes that I did, but at the same time, it makes sense. Yeah, the character of Tyler Tuskman is literally Jonah. And I was thinking that while watching the show, and I was like, wow, it was just, they casted it perfectly that way because there's so many parallels to the Jonah character from Superstore and Tyler Tuskman that it just made so much sense. And I'm very happy that they casted him. And the rest of the cast is great as well. I mean, a lot of big names there, which is really, really cool. The characters in the show are awesome. There's a lot of new monsters. We get to see some of the old monsters from the original movie, of course. Just so good. And I also had written down a couple of little notes because there was a lot of really funny kind of jokes that were either nods at the original movie or just some funny things. So the first thing that I wrote down is musical. And that was when at the baseball game, Mike ends up like saying, oh, he's preparing for the musical or the play or whatever. And he kind of does he re-says what he was saying in like a theatrical way, which obviously is a joke from the original movie. And then you see the picture of Mike with his favorite baseball player and the logo for the team is like right on his face. And obviously that is another joke from Monsters Inc., which is arguably one of the funniest jokes ever. I love that joke so much. And then when you see when you see the Yeti, they make a huge Star Wars reference, which was so awesome. He's like basically in the Wampa Cave, he's hanging upside down and he's going for the reach. And it makes sense, obviously, because Disney now owns Star Wars, so they can do that and obviously not have to worry about any legal issues. I thought that was really, really great. And then they also made a Dunkin' Donuts reference, which I thought was really, really weird. They kind of slid that one in when they're talking about the character Duncan. And then on the last episode, when Sully is walking through the floor, you can hear in the background Mike Wazowski scream, "I'm on the cover of a magazine." And I thought that was hilarious because that is another nod to the original movie. There was just so many moments like that in this show that just made it so much better. And I'm so happy that we're going to be seeing a season 2 because I think that there is a lot of unanswered questions that people want to get to from, let's say, if it was Monsters University or Monsters Inc. or now Monsters at Work. And I do believe that season 2 might be focused around Boo for a couple episodes, especially now that in this kind of Monsters Inc. workplace, the humans are no longer really a threat. The only threat is them being caught by the parents and obviously letting the humans or the childs, I guess, the children into the monster world. Obviously, that's not something that they want to do because you just can't break that boundary. And I think that that would be a pretty cool plot for season 2, where they're mostly not trying to get caught by obviously the parents, because obviously with them doing laughter now instead of screams, I also think that that is such a great idea. I mean, that was something that kind of happened at the end of Monsters Inc., but now that that is kind of something that they can revolve this series around is so cool because it makes sense, because it kind of, let's say for instance, like workplace harassment, like that's something that can no longer happen. So they've changed their ways. And that's exactly what Monsters Incorporated did by switching from laughter instead of screams. And just so great. And I can't wait for season 2.
All right. So the pops, I almost forgot about the pops. Honestly, I almost went to what pops we want to see next. There's only 2 pops, surprisingly, for the Monsters at Work lineup, which of course we have Mr. Tyler Tuskman himself, which of course the purple monster with big horns. Obviously, we already heard his backstory, so I don't really have to go into that. And then we have Val Little, which is the orange and red monster that is a fellow Mifter over at Monsters Incorporated. Generally hangs out with Tyler Tuskman during the series. And I guess I'll talk about both these at the same time instead of going one by one. These are pretty great pops for what they are. I'm kind of surprised they didn't end up making flocked variants of one or both of these characters, because I feel like that could have been an easy thing for Funko to do. Tyler looks pretty cool. I hope maybe in the future, if they keep continuing making Monsters at Work pops, for Tyler, they could do him with the donuts on the horns. I think that'd be cool. Totally makes sense. Val is pretty cool the way they did that, and just the pose overall. I don't think they really needed to change Val all that much as terms of the pops. I don't think they really had to change any of these pops, to be honest. It's pretty much spot on. There's nothing really that I could have added. I don't know what you got to say.
Yeah, I mean, these pops are pretty great for what they are. I think the only gripe I have is that we haven't seen more pops for this series yet.
Okay, so I guess this is where we go to as terms to what pops we want to see next in said lineup. So today, what pops we want to see next in the Monsters Inc. / University / At Work lineup of Funko Pops, which normally I like putting down 5 pops. It's just an easy number. And I know MD will be probably having 10 or something, but I felt like I couldn't do just 5. There's just so many off the top of my head. There's a lot of characters we definitely want that they haven't made, but I feel like these 6 ideas I have are pretty sweet. And I feel like there may be some that MD doesn't mention on his. So the first one I'm going to discuss about, which will probably be on MD's list, honestly, because he's mentioned it before, is for Monsters at Work, and it's Fritz. I think Fritz would be a great character as terms to the Monsters Inc. lineup or Monsters at Work lineup overall, especially if, let's say, they didn't want to make so many other characters. Let's say if Funko said, all right, we're only going to do one more character for Monsters at Work, who would it be? I would definitely say Fritz. The next one is one that I actually, or I should say, will be mentioning in a video that would have released already actually this past week. And Mike Wazowski with Monsters Inc. Pop Town. I originally thought of adding Water Noose to this because it'd be a great way to add a new character, but I feel like Water Noose is like too big of a character, especially with like his legs to like fit in a Pop Town form. So I thought I'd put Mike Wazowski, and it would be Mike Wazowski with the hard hat that has the Monsters Inc. logo. I think that'd be perfect. And he has the clipboard. And I would love for this, and you kind of brought this up earlier about the joke. I would love for this to be like a Comic-Con exclusive so that you can have the sticker covering the box where Mike Wazowski is, so that it's actually covering his face, and it makes perfect sense for that joke. I think that would be phenomenal, and I would laugh so hard if they made that happen.
Congratulations, you win. I don't even have a list now. I actually already ripped it up. It's gone. That's just the perfect pop. It's over. Okay, have a good day, guys. We're done.
Anyways, moving on. All right, the next pop that I have is a 3-pack, and it's the CDA workers in the yellow hazmat suits. I think these would be really cool because they all have different shapes as terms of their heads. So I could have made it like a 4-pack maybe, because I think there are at least 4 different styles, but I think there's like 3 that people usually recognize. But I think just having a few CDA workers and not doing one single one would be better. Next up is probably once again one that is also on MD's list because we both really want this, and that is George Sanderson with the cone. I think it definitely makes sense. I would love to see George Sanderson bald form with the cone around his neck, and then even if you even have patches of hair, because he's not completely bald when he gets shaved by the CDA. And then it would be funny to see the sock on his back. Next up is a Randall pop. I think we definitely need a Randall pop. And I have this just normal Randall with a translucent chase. I think it definitely makes sense. Just make purple Randall and then just make a translucent chase because he goes invisible a lot because of his chameleon-like powers. Well, because he is a chameleon, but his skin changing colors where he can blend into whatever environment he can do. The last pop I have here, I think I was like, okay, how is this going to be pulled off? Will there be a character involved? But I think just having this by itself would be great. And that is a pop deluxe of Boo's door. I think just having the pop of just the door itself and it's hooked up to the machine with even the little yellow tank on the side. Maybe you can have it filled up too or whatever. I think that'd be pretty cool. They've done this before with objects, like example, NYCC 2016, they had the Game of Thrones throne just empty itself, and that you can have it where you can add pops to it for like photo a day challenges or whatever, or just overall you can have it out of box with a pop out of box and it could sit on the throne instead of a Game of Thrones character. I think just having the Boo door by itself, I think definitely makes sense.
Okay, on to my list. And wow, I am surprised that we actually have quite a few similarities in our list. And the first one I have to get to, which I can't believe you said, is a 3-pack of the Child Detection Agency. Because I literally wrote down 3-pack of the Child Detection Agency. I can't believe you decided 3-pack. I was thinking no, if DK puts the CDA on it, it's gonna be 1 pop. But somehow you put 3-pack. I also put 3-pack. So Funko, make it happen. Then I also do have Fritz on my list. I think he was an awesome character, and I think it would turn out to be an awesome pop that could be flocked potentially. Another pop that I have on here that we both have is George Sanderson. And I think that we need 2 versions of George Sanderson. I think we need a new mold that is flocked. There doesn't even need to be a common. I mean, it could just be flocked, and that is the pop. And then maybe even a con exclusive of him being shaven, because we need both versions. That first one was awesome. It's awesome to see a George Sanderson, but we need a new mold. And obviously, there would have to be a shaven version as well with the cone, because that is awesome. So then I'll get on to the rest of my list that we haven't had similarities on. I have Henry J. Waternoose, and this would be an awesome looking pop, I feel. I mean, he's got 7 or 8 eyes, and I just love the character design, how he's kind of crab-like. And I think that pop would be sweet, even if it has to be a 6-inch pop because of his size. I think that would be decent. Then I have Fungus, which is one of my favorite characters from Monsters Inc. For whatever reason, I have this really cool action figure of him that I've always loved as a child. So I always liked this character. And I actually have a chase version for him where he's very pale and his lips are all sucked out from that machine. I think that would be a great chase, and I really hope that does happen. And then I have Flem. I think that he's a cool character as well. That is the monster that ends up falling on the jacks and ends up poking his butt. I think that he's hilarious, and I think that there needs to be a pop of him. Then I have a 2-pack of Needleman and Smitty. They're awesome characters as well. And I think that a 2-pack just makes sense. They don't need to be separate pops. They're always seen together. So why not have them in a 2-pack? Then I have Don Carlton from Monsters University. He was an awesome character. He's got his little mustache, and I think that would turn out to be an awesome pop. And I feel like that's got to be one of the fan favorite characters from Monsters University. I also have Duncan listed down. I really liked the character of Duncan. I like his design, and I think it would make sense to be popified, how he has kind of 4 eyes that kind of, I wouldn't say float because they don't float, but they're kind of on antenna, I guess you could say. So that would be a cool pop. And then last but not least, I have a Mike Wazowski pop, because I don't think we have enough Mike Wazowski pops. And that would just be simply Mike Wazowski with the Monsters Inc. hard hat on.
All right, guys. So that is going to be the end of this week's edition of a Funko Popcast. If you enjoyed this special fandom-related podcast on Monsters, Inc., make sure you smash that like button. Comment in the comment section below and let us know what your favorite pop is from the Monsters, Inc. lineup, and let us know what do you want to see next in the Monsters, Inc. lineup. Press the subscribe button for more content like this podcast and any other videos we do on this channel in the future, and press the little bell beside it to be notified of when that future content gets released. But anyways, guys, thank you for listening to this fandom-related podcast on Monsters, Inc., and we hope to see you guys next week on a Funko Podcast. 1, 2, 3, I'm out of here.
Put the thing back where it came from, more so help me, so help me. Peace in, peace out.